Khalil Davis, the newest 49er, just in the nick of time. John Lynch made a trade before the deadline for a defensive tackle. Let's take a look at what Khalil Davis brings to the table. The simple story is speed. This guy coming out of college at Nebraska posted an elite speed relative athletic score. You can see a 4.7540, which is wild for somebody who weighs about 315 pounds. Now, coming out of college, it was only about 308 pounds. So the size metrics on the spider chart don't score as well. He's a smaller defensive tackle, but he has bulked up to 315 pounds, and he could still explode off the football. In fact, I immediately talked to a coach who has worked with Khalil Davis in the past, and he says that he's stout in the middle and he's has a good motor, hard worker, good motor, obviously can translate that speed to the football field in pursuit. And the 49ers' biggest need entering this trade deadline, and this is something that wasn't a secret, this is something that we talked about a lot, was fortifying the run defense. They rank in the 20s, EPA per play, expected points added per play in run defense. It was also a weakness of this team's last year, and was something that they struggled with against the Detroit Lions in the first half of the NFC Championship game. If the goal is to get to the Super Bowl and win it this time, the 49ers are going to have better run defense, especially given the fact that Detroit, who looks like the team to beat at the moment in the NFC, has the best rushing offense in the league. So Khalil Davis is somebody that can rotationally help the 49ers improve that run defense, which has been strained on the inside. We know they lost Eric Armstead when he refused to take the pay cut over the course of the offseason. We know that Javon Hargrave is out for most, if not all, of the season. Maybe he'll be back in time for the playoffs, but he's more of a pass rushing specialist anyway. They've needed more rotational juice on the inside. And somebody like Khalil Davis, not to be confused with his new teammate Khalil Davis, is somebody the 49ers believe can give them that solid rotational depth on the interior. He played for DeMeco Ryans and the Houston Texans, and this is a big deal for a couple of reasons. A, the 49ers have a style of play that wants defensive linemen to fire off the ball. It's a wide nine under Chris Kasarik, which means that the defensive linemen are aligned far apart from each other. It gives the edge rushers more of an angle to attack the quarterback. But because of that, the defensive tackles on the inside are on relative islands. That requires great strength and or athleticism from the defensive tackles to be able to win on those islands, to command double teams, to defeat blocks, to allow the linebackers, who are also supposed to be fast to succeed in this system, to fire from the second level and close gaps. So that's why the 49ers covet defensive tackles with truly plus off the charts characteristics in either one facet or the other. It could be height. We saw that with DeForest Buckner and with Armstead. Could be speed. We've seen speed and agility from somebody like Khalil Davis, who is a former inside linebacker at the college level, so he can obviously move. Or it could be the straight line speed that we've seen from somebody like Khalil Davis. Again, not to be confused with Khalil Davis, who ran that 4.7540 coming out of Nebraska. When you do look at the metrics for Khalil Davis, though, it's not just the speed, it's also the strength, which I think is a good replacement for the fact that he's not all too big. But the bench press on the spider chart, also at a very high percentile, along with that speed, which I think is important for the 49ers as they try to work another player into the rotation. The familiarity with the 49ers scheme because of the time with the Texans is a significant deal for Khalil Davis. DeMeco Ryans has been there now for 2 years in Houston. He left after the 2022 season, where he was very successful as the 49ers defensive coordinator. Those 2 years have overlapped with Khalil Davis's time in Houston. On top of that, the 49ers already made a trade with the Texans, a much higher profile trade, entering this season a few months ago from Malik Collins, who's at the very same position, also plays defensive tackle. So the 49ers have seen Malik Collins successfully adapt from what Houston ran to what they're running. Malik Collins is actually in the top 7 this year in pass rush win rate. This is the best production that Malik Collins has had in terms of pass rush win rate, which is ESPN's measure of how frequently a defensive lineman beats a block in 2.5 seconds or less. So they've seen Malik Collins deliver, and the 49ers believe that they can watch Khalil Davis follow a similar track. On top of that, Davis and Collins have already played together, and so much of football is cohesion. Offensive linemen especially need more time working with guys next to them so that they know what the movements will be in the heat of battle. But I think it applies to defensive linemen as well. And the 49ers have tape of Khalil Davis playing next to Malik Collins in Houston, so they feel that this can be a quicker transition. I would assume, just given the state of the trade market, and this is football in general, that Houston might have been interested in a surplus 49ers offensive lineman. You look at somebody like Spencer Burford, who was a starter for this team last year, but obviously no longer starting for the team this season. Would not shock me if the Texans were interested in picking up Burford, because obviously there is crossover schematically between those teams. So that can work in the other direction as well. But obviously, if that was the case, the 49ers held firm, did not offer Spencer Burford or anything like that in return. And they instead were able to pick up Khalil Davis at an extremely manageable cost of a 2026 seventh round draft pick. So the 49ers will have 10 or 11 picks coming up in this 2025 draft. I think given where they are right now, star-laden roster, having to pay Brock Purdy soon, not wanting to give up any more draft capital than they have to, because as we've seen the success of this 2024 draft class already, it's clearly the way to build a roster in a cost-controlled fashion, because draft picks are slotted at certain values. 49ers did not want to tap into that 2025 draft reservoir unless they absolutely had to. And the fact that they only had to give up a seventh round pick in that 2026 draft allows them to kick the can of expending draft capital down the road. And now they have a player who is under contractual control, obviously, here through 2024. But Khalil Davis is also going to be a restricted free agent at the end of this season. So the 49ers do have at least some optionality when it comes to potentially keeping him if he does perform well over the back half of this season. It's only going to cost them about $500,000 to $600,000 on the cap to add Khalil Davis into the mix. And this was a guy who was at 230 plus snaps for the Texans already last year. So he should be able to give the 49ers some decent production as far as snap load goes, which is what San Francisco needed most in the larger scheme of things. Big picture, the 49ers have a very good roster. Might still be the best roster in the NFL, even with a few injuries, but they're expecting to get injured players back, like Christian McCaffrey, like Dre Greenlaw. That's only going to turbocharge San Francisco, especially when CMC hits the field. So they have very good reason to believe they can go toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the NFL, some of the best teams in the NFC. That includes the Detroit Lions, if they ameliorate their biggest weakness, which is that run defense. Offensive explosiveness is there. The 49ers lead the league in explosive play rate. The secondary is really good. The offensive line is playing maybe its best football of the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era. Number 8 composite O-line score for the 49ers. But it has been the run defense that has languished for this team. And, you know, we talked about Calais Campbell. Doesn't look like Miami was too interested in selling, which isn't surprising or shocking, because they're kind of at that in-between spot with Tua Tagovailoa back, even though they're 2-6. So somebody like Calais Campbell, 38-year-old, not coming over. What was most likely was the 49ers were going to try to find a value pickup to improve that run defense so they can complete the team. You find where the weakness is. You try to find a player that can fill or ameliorate that weakness, and obviously you try to do it in a way that's sustainable to your long-term team-building prospects, which means not burning too much capital to do it. And for the cost of a 2026 seventh-round pick, I think that Khalil Davis, to tack on to a team that already had a Khalil Davis, is a good way to do it. That athleticism is there. The moldable clay is there for the 49ers with this 28-year-old. Now you can let Chris Kasarik get to work the same way that he did in 2020 with Jordan Willis, seventh-round pick swap. He ended up being a productive defensive lineman for the 49ers. Same way he did for Charles Omenihu, 2021 sixth-round pick. That was also a trade with Houston. Same way he did for Randy Gregory and Chase Young in 2023. You can add Khalil Davis to this list. The 49ers have a track record of success when it comes to finding value in trades for defensive linemen.